Hi, in this video I'm showing you the game between Fabiano Caruana and Dariusz Swiercz from round 9. The opening was English opening, and you can also call it reverse Sicilian in this case. And we had something that is reversed Rossolimo. Here it's white who is playing this kind of setup, like black in the Sicilian, but with the tempo up. And after knight e5, bishop c5, now Fabi chose to play b4. The idea behind this temporary pawn sacrifice is to take the e5 pawn from black in order to get his center stronger. And here black took on b4 and took back on e5. And now, as you see, white has two pawns in the center and black has only the d pawn. Black went with rook e8. White attacked the bishop with knight d3 and bishop a5. White castled, and now black plays c6, trying to take over some squares in the center. And white is playing e6, opening up the diagonal for queen and also preparing maybe also he wants to free his queen so the rook cannot capture on e2. And here black plays d6. I think that here he should have played d5, because after the next white's move he is not able to play it without weakening the pawn, and you'll see why. He plays d6 instead. If he plays d5 in this position and white captures, I think that black has a decent position. He would have to fight those pawns, those white pawns in the center by his pieces, but I think he would be able, by setting up some kind of barrier with f5, knight f6, bishop e6. I think he would be pretty successful in that. For example, if he tries rook e1, I think that something like f5, it seems a bit risky, but I think it's a good idea to neutralize white's pawns. Because if white manages to get e4 and d4 in time, then it's going to be hard for black to defend. But if black manages to get f5 in time and just develop normally bishop e6 and stop these pawns, I think his prospects in the future are really good, because he also has 3 versus 1 on the queen side, and that's really a nice advantage on the queen side. Instead, he plays d6. He waits with d5, but now white goes with knight f4. And like I said before, if black now goes d5, now he's weakening d5 pawn, and white can just continue with bishop b2, threatening to capture and take on d5 like it happened in the game, and it wouldn't be so pleasant for black to continue this position. So instead of d5, black plays bishop f5 here. White continues bishop b2, and now black is seeking an exchange of bishops. But Fabi rejects with bishop h3, and now black plays rook b8. He wants to play on the queen side, he wants to play b5 at some point. White pushes away the bishop to g6, and White's bishop goes back because now there's no danger of exchanging it. And also he wants to stop b5 if possible. Black goes back to c7 because he doesn't have any target on a5, so he goes back a4 to stop b5. Now black is trying to prepare it again, and white goes with e4, trying to mobilize pawns in the center. And here black makes a weird move, which is d5. It's not so weird, but it gives up a pawn. In return, black gets a bishop pair and a b free pawn, a b passed pawn. But I think that the best chance here was to just go for liquidation on the queen side. For example, if he takes with a c pawn, you take back. And now a very strong move for white would be h4, which would provoke h6, because white threatens h5, of course. That's the main point. And if black goes h6, then you take on g6, and after ab, rook b5, queen c2, black would be better because he has a bishop pair and he also has clear targets in black's position. And in this case, it is the c6 pawn and also potentially g6 pawn. And light squares around the king are pretty vulnerable. And it comes in handy that this bishop is unopposed. So I think that black would have plenty of troubles, but I think it's still the best way to do it. I think that troubles began with not playing d5 on time. But let's continue with this. He plays d5 and white took on d5 and black recaptured. If he took on f4 here and after gf he took back, then black is just losing a piece, because after f5 you cannot go here, because you cannot go to h5 with the bishop, because bishop f6 is losing a bishop. Bishop d1, bishop d8, and we just reach a position which is just a free piece for white. So he takes on d5, and now white is giving up a bishop pair, but in return he gets a pawn. Queen takes f6 and knight d5. Queen goes back, and now white goes with h4, trying to trap black's bishop on g6 by pushing h5, and that's why black plays f6. White's deploying his rook from a1 to c1. Black goes bishop d6, and now knight goes back to e3. Here black tries to create a passed pawn so he can deflect white's forces from the king side. They exchange pawns, and now white is trying to create some offensive on the king side with queen g4. Also, it was possible to play h5 and after bishop f7 to induce some weaknesses in the black's camp with h6, and after g6 to push d4. And I think that one of plans for white could be f4 and e5, trying to create a pawn storm in the center. So f4 and d5, and just use the fact that black's king might get attacked if the position gets open. Instead, after AB, he played queen g4. Instead h5, he played queen g4, and white's bishop goes back to f8 in case knight goes to f5 and attacks on g7. And also you want to attack on d3. White is defending his d pawn with rook d1, and now black is pushing his b pawn. And we have some pawn pushes here. White attacks the bishop, and he normally goes back to f7. Now white is trying to limit black's bishop on f7 by pushing the d pawn, and now king just steps away from the pin. And now white has to think about stopping this b pawn, which is very close to the promotion square. Now black gets active, but I think it's not a good move. I think it's better to keep it on f8 as a defensive piece. I think a better idea was to double heavy pieces on the b file by rook b4. Also putting some pressure on e4, although you cannot capture immediately, but in some way it slows down the attack of white. And in case of knight f5, you can just play queen b6, and on h6 just g6. It's nothing serious. Black holds everything under control. That's the main idea. I don't say that knight f5 was the best move in this case, but I'm just showing that immediate attack doesn't work for white in this position. So something like rook b4 and queen b6 would make sense in this position. Instead, he chooses the other plan. He goes bishop c5, and now white goes to f5 with his knight and defends by rook on g7. If he went back to f8, now it's different, because now white got some time, and now he has knight d4. He's threatening knight c6 to make a fork, and in case white escapes somehow, like black escapes with queen d6, then he would just be able to capture on b3, and it's an extra, it's not an extra, but 2 pawns up. And the only hope that black had for some counterplay is gone, so it would be almost losing for black. Instead, he goes rook g8, but I think that now already it's a really tough position, because black didn't get doubled on the b file on time, and now he's just going to suffer. Now he plays queen f3, and if black tries queen b6, white can play rook d3 and attack this b3 pawn, and also he can combine attacks on the b pawn with h6, weakening the king side of black. For example, if he tries b2, then white just steps down and attacks on b2. Also, he can push h6 next, which drastically weakens the king side. So in this position, after queen f3, he goes to b4, And now white plays h6, and after g6 he puts his knight on g7, and black played b2, trying to save his pawn. If he tried something like bishop f8, now white would be able to use the pin on the bishop by playing e5. Now you cannot capture the pawn because queen could take the bishop, and if you take on g7, then after he takes back, rook takes. Now after e6, white has these two pawns which are far advanced, and also he would be able to capture on b3. Let's say bishop goes back to g8, then you can capture on b3, and those two pawns are going to decide the game. So after b2 and e5, now again we have this pin on the bishop, so white made a really good choice. And now black has a tough choice to make, how to stop these two pawns and how also to protect his b pawn. And he went for bishop d4, and after e6 and bishop e8, now white made a good practical choice. He took on d4, giving up the exchange, but also eliminating every counterplay that black had, which is the b pawn. And now after rook d4, he took on b2, and now he's simply winning because of these two pawns, and also black's pieces are completely passive, totally passive. Black went bishop a4, and now rook just went in to the 7th rank. Black played f5, and here white took on f5. Now the point behind taking on f5 is that after gf, you can simply capture on f5 and attack on h7. If he tries to defend with rook g6, you have this check. And now you capture a rook, because if he goes to f6, then you have rook b8 check. And now the only way to cover is rook g8, but that leaves the queen undefended. And that's the end of the game. So after knight f5, he gave a check on d1 first, and after king h2, now again he could not capture on f5 because there's queen c3 check, and there's no good way to cover diagonal. So after queen f6, white goes knight d6, and in this position black resigned because the queen is under attack, and also there's a deadly threat, knight f7, in case an exchange occurs, like queen takes f3, bishop takes, and now we have a double threat. Knight f7, sorry, knight f7, and bishop takes rook on d1. And that's why black resigned here. He couldn't handle all these threats, and also, as an addition to that, we have d5 and d6, which are very close to promotion. So that was this game, and after 9th round, Fabiano is, I think, 4th right now, half a point behind the leading trio, Saul, Enderman, and Sevian. So these two last rounds are going to be really interesting. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.